I am Brad Keelor. She is Ashley Cabas. Next up on Director's Cut, find out how GI and geo-congress helped her decide to become a professor. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. Yes, it is a new year. It's 2024. Last week we had our Best of 2023 episode, and this is our first episode of the year, Season 5, with a guest, and we are so excited that you are here with us. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. As I said, every single week I sit down with a different GI member who has stories to tell about themselves. You know the drill. Some are personal, some are professional, but all of them are fun. If you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, make a New Year's resolution. Say to yourself, I will learn about the Geo-Institute. After I watch this interview today, I will go over to geoinstitute.org. There I will learn a lot of things, like the GI is a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and that we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. The other resolution you should make is to like, subscribe, and get notifications. And if you do those things, we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. We are here today to have an actual interview and not hear about New Year's resolutions. Joining us from Raleigh, North Carolina, where she is a faculty member at the North Carolina State University, Go Pack, is Ashley Cabas. Welcome, Ashley.
Hi, Brad. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We are going to have an amazing time today. That I am certain of. There are 10 questions for you, the same as we have for everybody every week. And there are 2 that we ask everyone every time we do the show. And we start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Great. So my job is to advance the earthquake engineering field, and specifically the geotechnical earthquake engineering field. And I do that in 2 ways, hopefully in 2 meaningful ways. One is by advancing research, and for that I study a lot. So my job is really to learn and try to understand fundamentals on how to advance the state of practice and the art in geotechnical earthquake engineering. But then the second part, and probably more importantly, my job is to enable, support, empower the next generation so that those advances continue. I really want to make sure that we have, or we include as many voices as possible, and we empower them so that they can contribute meaningfully to those advances. And it's not just on me as an individual or as a professor, but also making sure that they can contribute to the field of geotechnical earthquake engineering.
That was awesome. We are so many episodes into this show, and you are the first person who in their job description has said the S word, study. And so I want to ask you a follow-up question here. You know, it's 2024 now, and I feel like we should be in this age where it's really easy to get all this information, to follow other journals, to see what's new in research, and yet there are things happening, whether it's the downfall of Twitter or any other things, that I feel like in the past few years have actually made it more difficult to aggregate this information and to find it. So what is your process for finding new research and finding out about new advances in the community?
That's a great question, and one that I think many of us struggle with. So I will tell you about my personal experience, but it's by no means the only way, of course. I am very fortunate to have an amazing research group, and through various interactions with them, I make sure that we stay on top of the most important advances. In our weekly group meetings, for example, we have things like journal clubs where we each pick a specific scientific journal, and then they are in charge of bring in 2 or 3 papers that they think can contribute to the mission of our lab. So that is one way to do it. Another way is that I usually follow colleagues that are doing great work in areas of our interests specifically. So I get reminders on different, by different platforms, and it could be social media, it could be ResearchGate, for example, or Google Scholar, and that way I am at least reminded that there's a new paper. And some of my colleagues are very prolific authors, so I get multiple reminders in a span of 2 weeks. So it's not easy. And then I would suggest people to have an organized way to have all their references so that they are not just having open tabs everywhere. Yeah. That's also helpful because then it helps you just go back to maybe a library of specific topics, and then it just streamlines the process. And the last thing I would recommend is to budget some time on your calendar to read. It's something that we can forget because we are, especially in academia, we're pulled in so many different directions. I'm very intentional in how I use my time now. So I allocate time every week to read. And this means maybe, a new paper or a paper that's actually something that I want to revisit to understand it a little bit better. So if you are intentional in doing that and putting that on your calendar, you may be more likely to actually sit down and read.
Oh, I like that. That was a good answer. And it was born out of my sadness that even though it's been like 7 years now, that Google Reader doesn't exist anymore, because those RSS feeds from journals were amazing. You would see just the article in about 2 lines of text, and you could go through thousands a day. And I'm very sad that doesn't exist anymore. Let's get to some fun stuff, because that's the bread and butter of Director's Cut. Not that last answer wasn't fun.
That's right.
So here's your first fun question, Ashley. What's the biggest argument you've ever had with someone, and what was the result?
Oh my. So you make me think of, a bunch of them. And then when I think about these arguments, top 5, top 3 are always with my beautiful sister. And I have to give you a little bit of background for this, because she is also a professor, but she's in the humanities. She is a professor in journalism. And me being an engineer, you can already imagine where this is going. And it's just amazing how she is the person that knows how to push my buttons, and nobody touches her buttons like I do. So our arguments range. I don't remember specific details of those top 3 biggest ones, but it ranges from the deeply personal and emotional to just assessing and exploring different edges of our professions, right? And the good part, I would say, and the truth of it all is that we both grow a lot from those arguments and those discussions. So I'm thankful for those, even though at the moment may not look like that. I ultimately I am fortunate to have her. She's my favorite person in the world. Just don't tell her.
When I wrote this question, I started to think about it for myself, and I realized that there are very few arguments in my life that I could actually even remember. Yeah. Like, do you feel like it's the same way for you, that even though it's a big deal at the time, when it's done, it's just like out of your head?
Yeah, I feel the same way. That's why I wasn't able to remember specific details. But hopefully that makes you lighter if you're not carrying any. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's a good way to look at that. I like that. The third question in the lineup is always the research question. We're never going to deviate from that. It's like I said, year 5 of doing this show, and it's been the same every time. So we know what works around here. Your research is super interdisciplinary, and I think that's what I want to lead you into here. And maybe we'll start with an easy question about that. And what disciplines do you touch? And then talk about some stuff you're working on lately.
Yes, thank you so much. This makes me just so happy. And one of the reasons that just keeps me excited about the work and working with my students. So yes, you said it. Our work is highly multidisciplinary. I believe that for us to make important advances, it won't come from from being siloed in each one of our different disciplines. We really, really need to start talking to each other and understanding terminology, understanding what other disciplines bring to the table. So that's what we've done in our lab. It's something that I learned early on when I was a PhD student at Virginia Tech with Adrian Rodriguez-Medek. He used to collaborate a lot with engineer seismologists and seismologists, and that's where this passion started to grow, because I'm a very curious person. So when I started to listen to what seismologists had to say about fault ruptures, about seismic wave propagation, it just felt like a whole universe that I hadn't fully explored. So I knew I had to immerse myself there. And then when I became a professor, that's exactly where I took my lab. So we do collaborate with engineers, seismologists, anything in the geosciences has been very, very helpful. Colleagues, for example, in geophysics, in geology, and more recently engineering geology, have been extremely helpful and informative of our research. And then more, I would say, recently and very enthusiastically, I'm starting to talk to social scientists. Maybe my sister is a big influence there. Our work after reconnaissance in Haiti also was a big player. But I feel more and more inclined to human-centered approaches that go beyond my training as an engineer. So that has been exciting for us to explore. Yeah.
That's a great answer. And I think the first time that it really hit me that this was what we were going to be doing. So I was at Carnegie Mellon, and they have this thing called the Entertainment Technology Center. This was maybe 15 years ago. And the guy I met there was like, I'll walk you down and I'll introduce you to the director. And this is the place that does, animations and robotics for Star Wars and a lot of the big movie franchises and TV franchises that people have loved over the years. So we start walking down the hall, and there's this disco ball going and like Van Halen blasting out of this office. And we get down there, and this guy turns around. His name is Don Marinelli. You can look him up. Dual PhDs in computer science and drama. And I was like, whoa, this blew my mind. And after that, I was like, this is it. Like, this is the way the funding agencies are going to start going. Like, this is where research is headed in America. And I mean, I don't think I'm Nostradamus or anything, but that has definitely played out. I mean, and I'm sure your personal experience has been the same. Like, this interdisciplinary work is what the funding agencies are looking for. So from a very practical viewpoint, it pays off. But also, like you said, it makes you work a lot richer, too, to work with these people.
Yeah, it makes you more creative. I love the challenge. And I think it's also very stimulating when you identify your edges, where your knowledge, is taking you just so far. And then there is this sea of other things, and I just want more. So I learned so much from my collaborators. And when I talked earlier about empowering people, I love to support collaborators as well with whatever I know or whatever I can. Because I believe in that power of that effective collaboration. Myself alone can do only so much, but it's just so amazing the places that we can go creatively and definitely for the purpose of advancing research. When you start talking to people in a different discipline, it's really, really stimulating.
Oh, that's awesome. You grew up in Venezuela. We have to talk about Venezuela.
Of course.
When Rodolfo Sancio was on, we talked about baseball. I'm not going to drag you through that. We don't have to have a Miguel Cabrera discussion. But instead, it's Director's Cut, and food is one of the centerpieces of this show. So I wanted to ask you, what food from Venezuela do we desperately need in the U.S. that we don't really have?
All of it. That's the answer. Simple, short, concise. No, and I will just say in a parenthesis that I met Rodolfo at a geo-congress. And it was the most amazing feeling because I was presenting a geo poster and he was one of the judges. And then I go over my explanation and the description of the poster. And at the end, he says, "You are from Venezuela." And I'm like, "How do you know?" And to this day, we have a great relationship. It's nice when you can find people from your hometown. And anyway, so I said it all. The food, if you find, if you can Google Venezuelan food, you will agree with me. But I think arepas is the obvious one, right? Like, and I'm glad to see that it has percolated into the U.S. in many ways, and maybe some fusion similar to Mexican food. I've seen arepas with pico de gallo, which is not something that we have back home, but hey, whatever, tastes is good. But then beyond arepas, I would say we have something called pabellón. And it's like our main dish for lunch. And that's a difference with the US. In Venezuela, we tend to have very big, heavy lunches. But then we have more coffee and maybe a siesta, maybe some nap in between. And then our dinner is lighter. So for lunch in this pabellón dish, we would have basically shredded meat that's seasoned. You may have heard this word adobo. So it's used in many other Latin American countries and the Caribbean. And then you will have rice, black beans, and plantains for sure. So very heavy. You have your fair share of protein there. So that's a favorite of mine, and my kids love that too. But then more like a snack type of food that Americans could love. There's one called cachito. It's like a little horn, but it's the bread is just amazing. It's just like it's not a sandwich, but it's just bread filled with ham, which seems very simple, but oh, so good. And I cannot find them in North Carolina. It's the only fact that I just don't love. And then the last one I will share with you all is called pequeño. And a pequeño is not a mozzarella stick. And those who know me, I always make this big. It's not a mozzarella stick. It's not the same. Will never be the same. It has a different kind of cheese inside. It's white cheese too. And again, it's wrapped like a mozzarella stick, and it looks like a mozzarella stick. It can be fried or not. It can be baked. I bake those. So yeah, it's a long list, but at least those three should get you going.
So when I was talking to Soon Ki Nam one time from UCF, he told me that when he was in grad school, they would drive all the way up here to the DC area for Korean food. And this blew my mind. It never really occurred to me that people would do anything like this. What's the farthest you would travel for Venezuelan food?
Wow. If I'm really craving it, I could go to Miami. Miami is a place where I know they have very good Venezuelan food because there's a large Venezuelan community there. So yeah, that would be the furthest I could go.
That's amazing. I love that. It's crazy too, because you think about it and you're like, really, it's just food, but it's a lot more than that. Like,
no, when I was in grad school, like my first semester there, we were unpacking and going to Walmart to buy stuff, for an unfurnished apartment, and I would feel homesick, and I would cook arepas, and the simplest one, because we have many fillings and those can be more time consuming to prepare, but just an arepa con queso, just cheese, it would make me feel like my mom is there with me, hugging me, and I'm at home again. And it is the power of food. I cannot, and my kids to this day, I am so proud that they like arepas. I don't know what I would have done or felt if they didn't like it. I'm like, no, you're gonna eat this today. but yeah, no, it is the powerful thing for sure.
That's awesome. We got to talk a little bit more about earthquakes.
Of course.
We're going to talk a little bit more about earthquakes a couple times, I think, but we're going to do it now.
Yeah.
And obviously, this isn't a problem that just happens in the developed world, and earthquake reconnaissance takes you all over the place. You can learn a lot, as we talked about earlier, from the social science aspects of this.
Yeah.
Is there anything specific to earthquake mitigation and recovery that you've seen in the developing world that maybe we could learn from in the more developed countries?
Well, I like to think about it from the perspective of data reach and data scars. regions. Because immediately when you do that, it allows you to find common ground more easily, even within the same country, like the US, for example. You were talking about seismic hazards. So the seismicity, the active seismicity that we have in Western US, for example, with the availability of ground motion records, subsurface characterization that we have there, compared to the availability of records in a stable tectonic region like Central and Eastern US, that immediately gives you significant differences in terms of translating or implementing analytical frameworks that work very well in a data-rich region. You immediately have this additional challenges when you move to a data-scarce region. So I like to frame it that way, and then immediately you will become an advocate for more data. Absolutely. I hope that we all understand the value of robust data collected in a way and shared in a way, and here's to Ellen Rashty, sharing is caring, sharing this data with others that can also use it and improve it, so that we all advance the field in a collaborative manner. And then the other thing that you realize when you think about these differences is uncertainty matters a lot. You realize that you need to characterize and quantify uncertainty, even more so for these data scarce regions. So that is something that, in addition, of course, of efforts, very important efforts in preparedness, characterizing seismic hazards in a way that incorporate this uncertainty is key to later on reduce seismic risk, especially in these data scarce regions like Puerto Rico, Central and Eastern US. Yeah.
So my follow-up there, I think, is going to be about citizen science. And I think, I think back to 25, 30 years ago, and I guess even a little more recently, as these new technologies rolled out, whether it was smartphones or the big one, the internet, or digital cameras or whatever, I think the big hope was that citizen science would become much more developed, and that it would also lead to big advances in research too. Do you feel like that citizen science has catalyzed that within seismology and earthquake engineering, or do we still have a long way to go, or is it both?
I think we have great examples of citizen science, especially after the Haiti earthquake, where the one of two records available after the 2021 earthquake came from a Raspberry Shake sensor, which was part of a big citizen science project developed after the 2010 Haiti earthquake. So there's definitely a place there. I feel like community engagement becomes even more important, and it goes back to us engineers understanding that ultimately we want to benefit society at large. So it makes sense that even within our training, our physics and our mathematics, we do incorporate these human dimensions to better understand and serve the communities that our civil infrastructure are meant to, improve their quality of life. So I feel like there's a long way for me personally to understand the intersection of those dimensions, because there was very little in my training that prepared me for it. And when I collaborate with people in the social sciences, for example, I realized that there's a lot for me to learn in order to do it well. So I would encourage colleagues to just read and study more about potential ways to integrate our contributions from the engineering side to those who better understand the human dimensions, because it's definitely not an easy path, but one that is worth exploring for sure. It's just not, it's not going to be an immediate change. I think that both groups need to work together to do that.
Oh, that's perfect. That's the first time we've talked about this on the show in a long time. So I'm glad it came up. I didn't even plan on talking about it, but that was really good. So the other question we ask everybody when they come on the show is, how'd you first get involved in ASCE and GI? And I think at the end of this, you're going to get to that story that we teased at the beginning.
Yes. So I have to say Virginia Tech. It was such an amazing surprise how supportive they are to all of their students to attend Geo-Congress. It was a thing, and I didn't know about this. So my first year there, because I arrived in the fall semester, and then we went to Geo-Congress the next spring, I immediately got involved with the GSO, the Graduate Student Organization. I became a board member. I did everything from outreach to help coordinating our attendance to Geo-Congress. And then at Geo-Congress, I also participated in the competitions, especially Geo-Poster I really liked. And then I also participated in or became a member of the SLC, which was super interesting. And the Geo community of Geo-Institute and Geo-Congress always seemed so welcoming to me as a student that I always felt like I could just go sit in the Earthquake Engineering and Soil Dynamics Committee, because that's what students do. And Adrian would also take me there, and I'm very grateful for his mentorship as well. So it was just a very exciting environment for me, and I just wanted to be a part of it. And then later on, as a faculty member, I just continued doing as much as I could with sessions and so on. So I think that the story that you are referring to is very special to me. And this specific professor will remember, because every time I see him, I remind him that he's a big part of my decision of becoming a professor. We were just talking at a Geo-Congress, and this was 2014. And he's like, well, what are the next steps for you? I was a student still. And I say, oh, I'm looking for jobs in the industry. That's what I want to do. I want to tackle big problems, big complex problems and projects around the world. And he's like, And what about research? And I'm like, oh, I love research. That's like my favorite part. And teaching, have you been able to teach or explore? And I was like, oh yeah, Adrian lets me teach these classes, and it's amazing, and the students' feedback. And he's like, And then he says, have you been able to mentor any students? And I'm like, yeah. And in fact, that year was my first year. Adrian had a student from Chile visiting, and he just asked me, why don't you set some project for her, some goals, and work with her through those and see where it goes. And I did that, and Brad, it was amazing. I think it was one of the, earlier catalytic moments for me, because what I felt when she was understanding, we were doing site response, and I taught her the fundamentals, the software that she was going to use. And when she came back to me with the right answer and some interpretation, I was just so excited. I'm like, this is amazing. And then I told my colleague this, and I'm like, yeah, I just feel so great when I can help others understand these things. And he's like, so you like research, teaching, and service. It looks like you want to become a professor. And it's so obvious to me right now, but at the time, it was shocking. It was really, really, really shocking, because I looked at him and I was like, oh, no, I cannot become, that's not for me. No, that's like super smart people. Only geniuses do that. I cannot do that. It's not. So after that, I went on a journey to be okay with really, really being passionate about becoming a professor and finding that confidence to do it, because I think that wasn't the way. And it helped me realize that that's what I wanted to do, and I shouldn't be afraid to just go for it.
Oh, that's really cool. I've asked a lot of people that question over the years, if they had a moment where they knew that's what they wanted to do. And most people answer no, that it just kind of gradually happened over time, and that's where they ended up. So this is perfect. This makes it all worth it that you did have a story like that. So now I can keep asking that question to everybody. Yes. So before you came on the social media juggernaut known as Director's Cut here this week, you were featured on another much more popular high-profile podcast hosted by Jonathan Van Ness called Getting Curious. And this is a big deal. Like, this gets hundreds of thousands of views and downloads on iTunes and on YouTube and stuff. What did you learn from being on that show? I mean, it had to be an interesting experience.
Oh, yes, it was. Yeah, to this day, I remember it vividly. And I was so surprised that they contacted me. I thought it was a spam, because, like, why would Jonathan Van Ness want to talk to me about earthquakes? So after iterating with his team a little bit, I realized that they learn about our work, my lab's work, on Twitter and social media, and they were curious about our approach to mentoring the students. They really resonated with the way I was talking about my students and my students' success, and that was very good to hear, because I did mention, there are many experts that you can talk to. An assistant professor started, this was maybe 3 years ago, I don't remember. So I was also puzzled, like you could talk to others about this. But then the fact that they appreciated maybe my mentorship style, that was really nice. So Jonathan was amazing. I am a fan. I've seen his shows, and just talking with him was really a happy moment, but also I didn't know what to expect. And he made it really easy. I have to say that the biggest lesson for me was that science communication is really, really difficult. Yeah. And really, really important, because he would start with questions like, what's an earthquake? How does it happen? And I'm like, what? You don't. So even using words like seismic waves, he will stop me and say, wait, what do you mean by a wave? He would ask me about, equipping next generations with new tools. And I would talk about coding, programming. And he would say, but what do you mean? Like, what's coding? And I'm like, oh my God, I have to rethink about, and it was just an amazing experience, and one that I keep trying to explain my research in ways that will reach all those audiences. And of course, it varies. If you're in a technical conference, then people know what earthquakes mean. But there is I don't know, again, being myself very curious, there was a learning process that fascinated me. How can we, especially being interested in reducing seismic risk, we need to be able to communicate what the hazard looks like, what are the consequences. And if we don't do that at a level that the community will understand, then we're not there yet. The science will only take us so far. So it was an eye-opening experience, and more difficult than I thought, but also super fun. I really enjoy it.
Was it stressful at all? Because I think one of those things, you get in that position, and when you start getting those easy questions like that, you have this moment where you realize you might be the only engineer or the only scientist that person has ever talked to. And in that moment, you're representing the entire community.
Exactly. Yeah. And Jonathan had this question toward the end about what to do when an earthquake happens. And I'm not a specialist on preparedness. He didn't ask about ground motions. I wish he had asked about PGA. and when he said, what should people do? What would you do? I was like, okay. And I was very grateful for all my colleagues in science communication who have done the work of, you have to drop, cover, and hold. All those messages, you realize how powerful they are. They are almost in the background. You see some of these tweets, you see some of these campaigns, ERI, ASCE. There are many professional organizations that are, you see the intention in the message. And at that moment, they were very helpful, because that's exactly what I said. And he was also curious about early warning systems, which is something that's not in my core expertise. But as a member of, society, he was interested, like, can I know if an earthquake is happening? And, do I have 2 minutes? And I'm like, well, it's more like seconds. So even those notions that we debate so, excitedly in research, when someone asks without a technical background, you have to filter, okay, what's the main message? What's the important piece that they need for their safety, for, mass consumption? So that's a lot of responsibility. That was stressful.
That's a good answer, though. I like that a lot. That's and I'm sure you did fine representing the entire community.
I hope so.
So this next question has been on my mind a lot recently. I have a 17-year-old who's making his college decision and doing a lot of adult things for the first time. And so I wanted to put in here, what was the first thing that you bought or owned that made you feel like an adult?
Our car. I didn't have a car when I was back home in Venezuela. Caracas is a very big city, and the subway worked just fine for me. So I never had a car. And then when I moved to Blacksburg, I really didn't need it. But then toward the end, we saved enough to buy it. And we bought it from a friend. So it felt like a good transition, but we didn't go to an actual, shop to negotiate, nothing like that. It was very simple. Still, it made me feel accomplished, like, okay, we own a car, because we were renting at the time. So that was the first big asset for us, my husband and I. And then when we came here to NC State, maybe a year in or so, we had our first experience negotiating for a car and the rate and the thing. It was so stressful, Brad. So we did the whole thing. And funny enough, we went there with the mindset that we're just looking. Today is just to look at the options, see which one we like. Well, we left the venue with a car. We signed the whole thing. Our best friend was with us, and he was like, you guys have no determination. It was just, yeah.
But I think you learn, right? And there are those moments, right? My wife and I got married pretty young, and she would always say, for me, it was furniture was the big thing, right? And she would always say, until we were like in our 30s, that it felt like we were just pretending to be adults, that we were not like doing the real thing. And it did feel like it. Like you'd go to make these big purchases, and I was constantly like, are they judging us? Do they think we can't afford this? Like it was, there was a lot of layers into it, but it really does feel weird. But it's good. You had that transition. That's easy. That's a good answer. I like that.
Yeah.
So another question I've never asked anybody. I'm counting on you to have really good opinions on this one in here. So
yeah.
We're just going to come right out and do it. We have no lead up to this question. What's the most frustrating part of the tenure process for you? And not necessarily your own, like across the world.
Tenure is a topic. I feel like now that I'm a professor, I ask the students, oh, when are you graduating? And you see them like, I don't know. And I think tenure is similar when you ask early career professionals, like, oh, how's tenure going? You get the same, reaction. No, I think it's, I wouldn't say frustrating, but maybe something that's very difficult or complex is to find your voice as a scholar. I feel like you, especially in academia, you're pulled in many directions. You have so much to do. And then at the same time, many people will give you different pieces of advice coming from their different backgrounds, their different career stages, all, well-intentioned. But then it's like having all these voices and you just don't know which one to follow or what to do early on. And all of these decisions are really instrumental to building your program and having a successful tenure. So there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of pressure for you to make the right decisions. So I feel like finding your own voice, what you want to pursue, what you are truly curious about, it's a journey. It's something that's difficult to do, but then eventually when you find it, I think it can be very rewarding and make the whole process smoother and exciting again. Less fear, more coming from love of science, more. And this is something I tell my students all the time. Are you coming from fear or are you coming from love? Like, yeah, we have a deadline. Yes, we have to submit this paper, but you are excited about this work. It was really hard to do it, and now we are just writing about it. So let's not be fearful. Let's really be excited about the work. So that transition, I think it does, at least for me, it didn't happen immediately. And it was complex, I think, from the tenure perspective. And with this, I will say that's something that helped a lot, and maybe just unsolicited advice. It really helped me when out of nowhere, I would receive these emails or at a geo-congress, positive feedback, because that's also something that may make this process harder than it should be. You get a grant rejected, your paper has major revisions or is also rejected. So the feedback that you get is always criticism toward things that you missed, things that you have to improve on. But I think it's less often when someone comes to you and say, Ashley, you're doing a great job. I read your paper and it's awesome. Or, I would love to collaborate. And when those things happen, wow, that would make your day. That would really help you with your confidence, with your, just to boost that passion that isn't there and help you continue. So for all of those senior and even peer, in early career stages, I think that whenever you can say something positive of somebody else's work, you may not know how far that is going to help and support that colleague for those moments when they don't receive the positive feedback.
I mean, I really like that last point because I don't think I ever thought about this before, but even when a proposal gets accepted, it's not like the comments are like, this is the most groundbreaking work ever in the history of the world. It's still pretty critical, even when it gets accepted and you are getting funded. So that is a really good point. I like that. So at Geo-Congress in LA, you gave a pit talk and you announced a brand new research network called Escala that you are starting up, and it's been almost a year since then. So I'm wondering if you can tell everybody, maybe give them a little bit of background on Escala, although we'll put the pit talk, we'll put the link down in the show notes below where everybody's watching this now. And give a little summary of it and what's happened since Geo-Congress.
Yes, thank you. My passion project, as I call it. So yes, Scala means Earthquake Engineering and Seismology Community Alliance in Latin America and the Caribbean. And it's the first of its kind. It's a network of people interested in reducing seismic risks in the region, so the Latin America and Caribbean region. As I said in my GeoPit, you don't need to have a Latin American background, but just be interested in the problems that we're going to solve there and we are working or curious about. And in terms of development in the network, I'm super, super excited that we have now an executive board. As I was saying before, this is all really a collaborative effort. I cannot do all of this on my own. And I'm super lucky to have the most amazing colleagues. So after GeoPit, many of our current members and the new members, they were just super eager to contribute more to the initiative. So thanks, Brad, again, and everyone working at Geo-Congress for the invitation, because that was another catalytic moment for this outreach initiative. And now we have 4 more people in the board. So let me see if I get everything right. Dr. Gonzalo Montalva from University of Concepcion in Chile is one of our executive board members. Ashley Cartagena Morales from the Universidad Católica and Pontificia Madre in Dominican Republic. A new assistant professor in University of Reno, Nevada, Reno, Dr. Remin Pretel. And then last but never least, Dr. Jenny Ramirez. She's in consulting in geosyntech right now. And she was a PhD working with Dr. Shida Dashti. So now the 5 of us are really working, or what we will be developing this next year has to do with a strategic planning. Because one thing that was clear after Geo-Congress last year was that there was a lot of interest. And I was so happy to see that. I met Latin American colleagues that I had never seen, that they said they've been coming to Geo-Congress for years and we had never met. So this was that was a very special moment, I will say, Brad, and one that I will treasure. So what we're going to do is to start prioritizing content, developing content for our website. We will be redesigning the website that I presented last year, because some of the functionalities and aesthetics we want to improve, because we see that there will be just larger, more flow of people using or utilizing our resources. And then the idea is to start getting people engaged using working groups. So very soon, and I'm hoping in time for Geo-Congress 2024, I will be sending some announcements about how to participate more actively. Some of my students will be at Geo-Congress 2024 advocating for more participation in the network. So yeah, you'll definitely hear more from us very soon.
Oh, that's amazing. And again, like I said before the answer, click on the link below where you're watching this now, and you can see the Pit Talk from Geo-Congress 2023 on the launch of Escala. And I think for the non-Spanish and Portuguese speakers out there, what does Escala mean?
Oh, yes, thank you. So escala means to scale and also to climb in Spanish. So it was very intentional as well, and a fortunate coincidence with the acronym. But the idea is that we will help people reach those goals and achieve their highest potential through the, sharing resources, educational resources, mentorship, and really encouraging community engagement throughout the network. And then the scaling piece is because I realized that this could be something that can grow with our community, that maybe now we have this 4 executive board members and more than 22 global partners, I will say, and more than 15 student ambassadors so far. But I really, really envision this as expanding and growing into something that goes beyond my tenure as a professor, beyond me and who is involved right now, for just supporting that sustainability of those advances and that network. I really hope that stays for years.
That's awesome. So, Ashley, you made it through all 10 questions and all the follow-ups. This was a good interview. We went all over the place in this one, but we did get the food talk, of course. For our viewers, if you liked what you saw today and you're here at the end, so you probably did, click like, subscribe, and get notifications, and we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. This is, of course, only episode 2 of Director's Cut for the year, which means you've got a whole year ahead of you, viewers, something to look forward to. So, Ashley, thank you again for doing this. This is fantastic.
Thank you so much, Brad, for the opportunity.
And for all our people in viewerland, we will see you next week with a brand new episode of Director's Cut.